Jackson Wheat and R.J. Downer did the legwork of tracking this claim down, and that's the first time they could find it. And after 1990, it started showing up in creationist talking points.
So they might have been fairly small.
So if you don't take the big daddy T-Rex, you just take a teenage T-Rex. If you don't take the big daddy, Apatosaurus, you just take the little 11-year-old, little, he would still be, 20 to 30 feet long.
Yes, because teenagers are known for eating so little. And here's the thing. The problem isn't really pen space for housing animals. It's storing the food and water. And doing so in a time when smoking and salting were basically the only reliable ways to keep food fresh for a year. But that option isn't available to all animals. Anteaters don't have teeth and must be fed insects. Now, to be fair, they can eat mashed up insects, so they don't need live prey, but they still need fresh insect slurpees daily. It means that Noah had to keep live feeder colonies to feed animals like anteaters, echidnas, some bats, pangolins, and Alvarezsaurus to keep the dinosaurs in the mix. Further, not only do koalas need fresh eucalyptus leaves, meaning Noah had to keep at least one such highly toxic tree alive on a ship with one window for a year, but koalas are so dumb that they won't eat leaves that aren't attached to something branch-like. You can't just pick the leaves. You basically have to keep the koalas where you keep the tree, since other than pooping and eating, they basically do nothing else but sleep, and if you wake them up, they're liable to scratch your face off, because they are mean. And also, this is nothing to say of the water requirements. Most land animals require fresh water to drink, and fresh water spoils, which is why alcoholic beverages were so important during the Age of Sail. It wasn't just for morale, it was that beer wouldn't become unsafe to drink after a few months, but fresh water would. Now, cows drink about 1.5 gallons of water per 100 pounds of animal, or about 12 liters per 100 kilograms. Now, he said about 30 feet long for a sauropod, which is about how long Camelotia is, and it had an estimated body mass of 22,000 pounds, or just under 10,000 kilograms. That means that it would need about 330 gallons of water, or about 1,200 liters of water a day. Noah was on the ark for about 400 days, and he needs to water 2 such animals, so we're looking at 264,000 gallons, or about 1 million liters of water. That's a lot of water to keep fresh for just 2 animals. What's Noah going to do? Let 660 gallons of water in rain each day just for 2 animals? Well, let's do the math on that one. The surface area of the top of the ark, which is the maximum area for rainwater collection, was 520,200 square feet. I'm using feet here because that's what Answers in Genesis uses, and they're the place that bothers to use actual published measurements with both. This means that every day, to water 1 species of dinosaur on rainwater, it would have to rain about 6 inches. That's a lot of rain. That would likely rival daily rainfall records in most parts of the world, and that has to be kept up after the rain was supposed to stop, so you really need even more during the actual rainy days. Now, you could say, what about desalination? Well, even with modern technology, it's unreliable and energy intense, and by energy intense, I mean you probably set fire to a wooden boat. So that seems out. One might also wonder how one could keep those eucalyptus trees alive during such a downpour, since they need sunlight.
But at 130.
But down 130 feet long, and so you put those on board the ark. The average size would be something like a sheep, and then so you have 140 sheep, and I think we've done feasibility studies on that, and that would take up 1 corner of one of the 3 decks. Those are plenty of space for all
The other kinds.
Funny though, how when you actually...
With Asana, it's easy to monitor projects across teams and track status and progress at a glance, so you and your team can make smart decisions faster. Try it for free at asana.com.
Funny though, how when you actually bother to do even basic math, it suddenly becomes pretty infeasible. And of course, that's ignoring the fact that everything would be on fire anyway, so who cares if you could get enough water?
So then they got off the ark, and what happened?
Well, since there's not evidence of them interacting with humans at all, and here I assume we're excluding birds, it seems that they almost immediately went extinct, making the ark pretty useless and got pretty silly. That is, if you decide to take this story as literal history.
That's the next interesting question.
Is it really?
We'll get to what happened to the ultimate result later, but here's a question when they got off the ark. Were any dinosaurs domesticated and used as pets?
Probably not, and they agree to, so let's move on.
Well, I think it's critical to show people that God's word is true, and that real science, unlike what you're taught in many of the universities and colleges and high schools and public institutions, real science supports the Bible. Real science shows there was a flood.
Well then, maybe you shouldn't have started out with a blatant lie about science. Here's the thing, professional creationists either know better and they're liars, or they don't and they're just incompetent. There's no real middle ground. The closest to a middle ground we have is Todd Wood, who knows he can't really support young Earth creationism, but he wants to try anyway. He knows he doesn't have evidence and that evolution does. He's only being intellectually dishonest, not regular dishonest. If science really supported the young Earth creationist point of view, there would be no need to lie about bird anatomy, geology, physics, astronomy, genetics, etc. to support it. And yet, every source purporting to support young Earth creationism that I've ever encountered has verifiably untrue things stated as facts, without fail. That's not the mark of science supporting you. That's the mark of desperation to be right when we can all see, as plain as the nose on your face, that you're wrong. And this level of reality denial is why I compare the young Earth to the flat Earth. Young Earth has more money and is more sophisticated, but ultimately they're both about ignoring aspects of reality that are inconvenient to you because you decided without good reason to believe something that is obviously untrue.
In my research as a geologist, I plot sediments and compile sedimentary records all over the world. Not quite full through the whole world, but I've gotten to part of it now. And it's showing each continent doing the same things at the same time. Flooding at the same level, at the same time.
The vast majority of the Phanerozoic rocks cannot be flood rocks because there is no mechanism for a flood to deposit them. Things like limestone, fine-grained non-flocculated shale, aeolian sandstone, subaerial tuff, evaporites, etc. all cannot form under a flood and are all found at various places in the supposed flood rocks. This is just the same argument as someone looking at a boat going over the horizon and declaring that this is proof of the flat Earth. It's the exact opposite. Nothing about the geology of the Earth even hints at a global flood. Not one scrap. That's why it's not taken seriously in science, only in pseudoscientific churches masquerading as science institutes.
The same general pattern to all the continents. They all begin kind of gradual flooding, and then they become progressively more and more and more up to a point, and then the water, you can see the water receding, pushing sediments offshore. And so you see that same general pattern throughout.
Water sediments.
But he didn't reach that conclusion after coming to the data with an open mind and seeing what they suggest. He came to that conclusion prior to any data and then just used a series of post hoc rationalizations to force the data into that paradigm while simply tossing out data that don't fit, which is nearly all the data. Science works by looking at observations and data first and then drawing conclusions from that.
It's 8 o'clock.
Creationism already has an inviolable conclusion that is assumed absolute truth at the outset, and then it seeks to conform any and all data to that conclusion, no matter how implausible it is. That is the opposite of science. Literally the opposite. Creationists could be sitting in a padded room smearing their feces on the wall and be closer to really doing science than they are doing what they actually do. It doesn't matter how much math you do, how many tables you have in your publications, how many samples you send off to be tested, how many degrees you get, or how many big words you use. If you start with a conclusion and then fit the data into it, you're anti-science. You're the opposite of a scientist. Brian Thomas, Timothy Clary, Gabriella Haynes, Andrew Snelling, Nathaniel Jeanson, Jason Lyle, Stephen Austin, Gunter Beckley, Danny Faulkner, Georgia Purdom, Arthur Chadwick, Taz Walker, Jonathan Sarfati, Robert Carter, Kurt Wise, Jeffrey Tompkins, Frank Sherwin, and all the rest are not scientists. They don't do science. They don't just do pseudoscience. They do anti-science. And yes, it's important to call these people out by name. This isn't an activity of a nameless, faceless bunch of liars and imbeciles. This is a direct attack on the very fundamentals of science by these individual people and many others, but these are some of the more prominent and public faces of creationism.
The rocks really do show exactly what the Bible says. And that's one of the things that at ICN we do is we show that real science confirms the youthfulness of our universe, the youthfulness of the Earth, the recent flood.
And all you have to do is ignore nuclear physics, thermodynamics, all of geology, astronomy, taxonomy, genetics, paleontology, meteorology, quantum physics, etc. After you've ignored more or less all of science, it can then be obvious that the universe is 750,000 times younger than it really is.
Dinosaurs were real.
The very fact that the audience they cultivate are the kind of people who have to be told that dinosaurs are real should tell you something.
You know, there are some people that still doubt whether dinosaurs are real, but when you dig them up like you and I have done, we know they're real.
How do you know that? And I really mean that. These are people who think that maybe limestone just got deposited in a flood under even heavier rock and don't see a problem with that, even though it's physically impossible. So on what basis can they say that dinosaur fossils aren't just flood-deposited concretions that just happen to take the shape of bones of animals that never existed? There's no consistent reason they could give. The very same way that we know that dinosaurs are real is the same way vegetation works, and what flood deposits do and don't look like. And the rocks aren't just a bunch of flood deposits. So if Clarius were to say that he can tell that a dinosaur is real, he needs to justify it. And here's the thing, I don't think he can without invalidating his belief in a young Earth that was flooded in the recent past. Now you, dear audience, might find that a bit far-fetched, and it is, but that's the thing, so is flood geology. But the difference is that most people are familiar enough with bones to more or less know one when we see one, but actual geologists are familiar enough with rocks to know a flood deposit when they see one. So it's actually a very fair comparison. Flood geologists can't actually identify any fossil as such with intellectual consistency.
The Bible tells us they run the ark, they land.
I don't care. If this were scientifically demonstrable, then we wouldn't need to reference the Bible. We could just demonstrate it scientifically. And if it were true, you wouldn't need to assume it's true at the outset. You could come to the data without that in mind and find that conclusion anyway. When it comes to science, there is no place for bringing your interpretation of the Bible into it. If you do science and it happens to correspond to your interpretation of the Bible, then good for you. If not, then I don't care. Get a new interpretation or just get rid of the Bible. Those are the options open to you that don't make you dishonest.
What's so important about dragon legends and old art that depicts an animal like a dinosaur?
It's cool to look at, that's about it. But for some reason, I always forget that these morons actually think that bad medieval art of dragons is actual evidence for late surviving non-avian dinosaurs. And for no reason. It's just them being stupid for no particular reason. Just say that dinosaurs went extinct within a few decades of getting off the ark. Who cares? At least then you don't have to sit here and pretend that the story of St. George proves that baryonyx was around in late antiquity Egypt, even though it's from England, or whatever they're about to say.
Well, I started answering that question by trying to think about where would we look for evidence if the Bible, if what the Bible suggests is right, that these dinosaurs lived in the relatively recent past, went on Noah's Ark, lived with humans. I mean, that's really weird to most ears. But that seems to be how you fit dinosaurs into the Bible's historical time frame. That means that dinosaurs would have gone off the ark. And so where would we look for that evidence that they may have lived at the same time as people who lived way back then, thousands of years ago after the flood?
We'd look for physical remains, both in the wild, such as in caves, or in other areas where some fossils are found. And in terms of human interaction, we'd look for human middens and graves for physical evidence of dinosaurs, whether that be in the form of remains of dinosaurs physically, or perhaps injuries caused by them, such as a human with a bite mark from one. Where we wouldn't look is old carvings that don't really look like dinosaurs, or the fanciful stories that include dragons, but also human-headed gods, ogres, and fairies.
And the thing is, you would not look in fossils, because the fossils are a record of the flood. And so if you find dinosaurs in the flood rocks, those are the pre-flood dinosaurs that died in the flood, right?
Right.
And so,
Well, here in reality land, they're simply too old to live with humans, but either way, yes, you shouldn't be looking earlier than the Holocene if you want to see evidence of humans interacting with non-avian dinosaurs.
we don't see humans buried with the dinosaurs.
Which we should, by the way. Floods characteristically jumble organisms from many environments together into a big graded deposit. So if humans and dinosaurs were in the same flood, they should be in the same rocks.
We don't see horses here either.
Which again is another point against the plausibility of the flood of Noah causing the fossil record.
So there's like swamp creatures and lake creatures and sea creatures buried with dinosaurs.
And desert creatures, and forest creatures, and oddly enough, we don't find modern swamp and lake creatures in many cases, like beavers. Gee, I wonder why that is if we're going for ecological zonation. Why aren't swamp creatures like Dimetrodon and Castor being buried with wetland dinosaurs? Conversely, why aren't all the desert animals like desert foxes, Gorgonops, and Ceratosaurus all found together? Who knows? God just made it that way to look exactly like an impossible flood didn't happen, and exactly like evolution did happen over deep time.
There's no hard ground. So that's not the right place to look for humans and dinosaurs coexisting, if that's what we want to look for.
This guy in this video already said that Psittacosaurus lived in a forest based on its coloration. He knows he's lying. There are dinosaurs that did not live in or particularly near water in the fossil record, and he knows it. But even without Psittacosaurus, we have many desert dwellers like Velociraptor, Protoceratops, Ceratosaurus, Coelophysis, etc. in the fossil record. Dinosaurs are not exclusively associated with wetlands. We also have dinosaurs that lived in the equivalent of prairies in many sauropods, who themselves probably kept the prairies from becoming forested by knocking down trees like modern elephants tend to, except with much higher efficiency because they were much bigger than elephants. You gotta lie to Yek. And boy, is he just diving headfirst into that lie. But further, humans do live in swamps and wetlands. There are whole cultures that live primarily in swamps. Other than the extremes of the interior of exceptionally dry deserts and extremely cold places, there are no places on Earth where humans don't bother to settle in. There is no reason to think humans wouldn't have done so for their whole history. But you know what? I think this is where I'm going to call it for today. I don't think I can keep going on with this craziness. If you liked this video, hit the like button. If you didn't, tell me why not in the comments and hit the dislike button. Either way, please do subscribe and hit the bell icon and turn on all notifications so you're always notified when I have new content. I'm the Denver Dinosaur.
Thanks for watching, but before you go, I just want to say a special thank you to my channel members and my patrons, especially those pledging $20 or above. Bob Knob, Work in Progress, Benthoven, Tapioca Weasel, Denny5252, Ian Chen, Landon Knoll, Nappy Babby, McSpooks, Sphincter of Doom, The Venerable Bean, and Atheist Animal. As you probably know, YouTube is a very volatile platform, and from month to month my income on the channel can swing wildly. The people you see on screen are directly supporting so that I don't have to worry too much about that, and the channel can keep going as it is, and perhaps even improving. If you'd like to join this team, there are links below to join the channel or in the description to join the Patreon. The Patreon starts as low as $1 a month, and the channel memberships start as low as $1.99 a month. On Patreon, you can even get a discount for pledging annually. If you do decide to pledge, you'll get access to an exclusive Discord server just for channel supporters, as well as early access to all of my pre-recorded videos, often up to 2 months in advance. Higher tiers will unlock even better perks. Now, if the annual or monthly pledge isn't right for you, but you still want to support the channel, there is a merch store down in the description, as well as an Amazon wish list just for me. And if financial support isn't something you can or want to do, then if you still want to help out the channel, please just like and share these videos and make sure you comment on them. It really helps the channel out. Thanks again for watching.